The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest room Park Do-hyun had ever seen. It stretched so far that he could barely see the other end. The ceiling was made of clear crystal, and through it, he could see 3 different moons hanging in the purple sky. Thousands of seats rose up like a mountain around the central platform where he stood. In those seats sat the representatives of over 200 alien species. Do-hyun was 43 years old. He had spent 20 years working his way up through Earth's diplomatic service. He had studied alien languages, alien customs, and alien politics. He had prepared for this moment his entire adult life. Today, he would present humanity's trade proposal to the full assembly. His hands were steady as he activated the holographic display. He had practiced this presentation 500 times. He knew every word, every pause, every gesture. But as he looked up at the vast audience, he felt very small. The aliens did not look at him with respect. They looked at him the way a person might look at a child who had wandered into an important meeting. Some of them were not looking at him at all. They were talking to each other, eating, or playing with their communication devices. Honored members of the Galactic Assembly, Do-hyun began. His voice was carried by translation devices to every corner of the hall. I come before you today to present a proposal that will benefit all our species. A tall being with blue skin and 4 arms yawned loudly. It did not try to hide its boredom. Do-hyun continued. Humanity has developed new technologies in energy production, medical treatment, and food synthesis. We wish to share these advances with the galaxy through a fair trade agreement. He pressed a button, and the holographic display showed diagrams of human fusion reactors. These reactors were 3 times more efficient than anything currently used in the galaxy. Human scientists had worked for 50 years to develop them. Our fusion technology can provide clean energy to any world, Do-hyun said. It is safe, reliable, and produces no harmful waste. A creature that looked like a giant insect raised one of its many legs. This was the representative from the Velix hive, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. When it spoke, its voice was like dry leaves scraping together. How long have humans been traveling among the stars? The Velix asked. 152 years, Do-hyun answered. The Velix made a sound that might have been laughter. The Velix have been in space for 40,000 years. What could your young species possibly teach us? Several other representatives made similar sounds. The laughter spread through the hall like a wave. Do-hyun kept his face calm. With respect, our fusion reactors are more efficient than Velix power systems. The data clearly shows. The data shows that humans are arrogant. The Velix interrupted. You have been part of the galactic community for less than a century. Yet you believe you can improve upon our ancient wisdom. In the observation gallery high above the main floor, Ambassador Kim Yuna watched the scene below. She was 61 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a simple style. She had served as Earth's chief ambassador to the Assembly for 15 years. In that time, she had learned to read alien expressions and body language as easily as she read human faces. What she saw now made her heart heavy. The representatives were not just dismissing Do-hyun's proposal. They were enjoying his humiliation. She could see the pleasure in their alien faces as they mocked the young captain. This was not about the quality of human technology. This was about power. This was about keeping humanity in its place. Beside her stood Choi Minji, her assistant. Minji was only 28, still full of hope and energy. They're not even listening to him, Minji whispered. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. No, Yuna agreed softly. They are not. Down on the main floor, Do-hyun tried again. He showed the medical advances that human doctors had made. Human medicine could now cure 17 diseases that the galaxy considered untreatable. Human surgeons had developed techniques that could repair damage to the brain and spine. The alien representatives were not impressed. "Human bodies are fragile," said a massive creature covered in thick scales. This was Representative Gorn of the Torak Dominion. "Your medicine works on your weak flesh. It is useless to superior species. We have adapted our treatments for many different biologies," Do-Yun said. "Our medical database includes successful treatments for over 50 species." 50 species out of thousands, Gorn replied. "You waste our time with this nonsense." The laughter came again. It was louder this time, and crueler. Do-Hyun showed the food synthesis technology. Human scientists had created machines that could turn basic elements into nutritious food. These machines could end hunger on any world. They could feed billions of people using nothing but air, water, and sunlight. "Impressive," said a being that looked like a floating cloud of gas. "For a primitive species. We developed similar technology 8,000 years ago. We have since moved beyond such simple methods." It did not matter that the human version was actually better. It did not matter that human food synthesizers use less energy and produce more variety. The cloud being had already decided that anything human must be inferior. Do-Hyun's presentation lasted 2 hours. By the end, most of the representatives had stopped pretending to pay attention. Some had left their seats entirely. Others were openly sleeping. When Do-Hyun finished, the Speaker of the Assembly, a thin being with silver skin and enormous black eyes, called for a vote on the trade proposal. The result was immediate and overwhelming. 1,742 votes against. 12 votes in favor. Those 12 were from small species who had been treated almost as badly as humans. "The proposal is rejected," the Speaker announced. There was no sympathy in its voice. "Humanity's request for expanded trade rights is denied. This matter is closed." Do-Hyun stood alone on the platform. The holographic display faded around him. He had failed. 20 years of work, 50 years of scientific research, and the hopes of billions of humans all rejected in a single afternoon. He walked off the platform with his head held high. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him broken. But inside, something had changed. Something had died. In the observation gallery, Yuna turned away from the scene below. Her face was calm, but her eyes were very cold. "Ambassador," Minji said, "what do we do now?" Yuna did not answer immediately. She walked to the window and looked out at the alien city that surrounded the assembly hall. It was beautiful, she had to admit. Towers of crystal and metal reached toward the sky. Flying vehicles moved between them like schools of fish. Gardens floated in the air, held up by technology that humans still did not fully understand. Humanity had worked so hard to join this civilization. They had spent a century trying to prove themselves worthy. They had shared their knowledge freely, helped other species in need, and asked for nothing but acceptance in return. And this was how the galaxy repaid them. "Minji," Yuna said finally, "I want you to send a message to Earth. Use the secure channel. Tell them." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Tell them that the Assembly has made its decision. Tell them that we have been judged and found unworthy. Tell them that no matter what we offer, no matter how hard we try, we will never be equals here." Minji's eyes widened. "Ambassador, that sounds like giving up?" Yuna shook her head slowly. "No, it sounds like finally understanding the truth." She turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see the small human district. It was tucked away in a corner of the city, barely visible among the grand alien structures. That was where the human embassy was located. That was where human traders and scientists and diplomats lived while they tried to build bridges with the galaxy. Those bridges had never been completed. Every time humans tried to extend a hand, the galaxy slapped it away. "There is another message I want you to send," Yuna continued. A private message to the Council of Earth. Tell them exactly what happened here today. Tell them how our people were treated. And tell them," she took a deep breath, "tell them that I recommend we reconsider our position in this assembly." Minji looked shocked. "Reconsider? You mean leave?" "I mean exactly what I said," Yuna replied. "We have spent 100 years asking the galaxy to accept us. The answer has always been no. Perhaps it is time we accepted that answer." That night, Yuna sat alone in her office at the human embassy. The building was quiet. Most of the staff had gone to their quarters, tired and demoralized after the day's events. Only Yuna remained, staring at the communication device on her desk. The secure channel light was blinking. Earth had received her messages. Earth was waiting for her final report. She thought about Park Do-yeon. The young captain had come to see her after the assembly session. He had apologized for failing. He had blamed himself for not being persuasive enough, for not anticipating the aliens' objections. Yuna had told him the truth. It was not his fault. No presentation could have changed the outcome. The assembly had decided to reject humanity before Do-hyun even spoke. They had never intended to give humans a fair hearing. Do-hyun had asked what would happen next. Yuna had not been able to give him an answer. Now, alone in the darkness, she finally knew. She activated the communication device and began to record her message. "This is Ambassador Kim Yuna." Commander Lee Min-ho stood at the window of Station 17 and watched the stars. He was 45 years old, with short black hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. He had spent half his life in space, managing human outposts scattered across the galaxy. He had believed he would spend the rest of his life doing the same. Now, everything was changing. The message from Earth had arrived 3 days ago. It was short and simple. All human personnel were to prepare for evacuation. All human technology was to be collected and secured. All human stations were to be shut down in an orderly manner. No deadline was given. No explanation was offered. Just a single line at the end. "We are coming home." Min-ho had read the message 12 times. Each time, he hoped he had misunderstood. Each time, the words remained the same. Humanity was leaving the galaxy. "Commander?" A voice came from behind him. "The transport ships have entered the system." Min-ho turned. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Bak Junsu, stood in the doorway. Junsu was young, only 32, but he was one of the best officers Min-ho had ever worked with. Right now, his face was carefully blank, hiding whatever emotions he felt about the evacuation. "How many ships?" Min-ho asked. 6 transport carriers, sir. Enough to evacuate all 17 stations in this sector." Min-ho nodded slowly. "And the timeline?" "They want us cleared out within 30 standard days." 30 days. 30 days to back up 15 years of work. 30 days to erase every sign that humans had ever been here. "Begin the preparations," Min-ho ordered. "Start with the non-essential personnel. Families first, then civilian workers. Military and technical staff will leave last." Junsu saluted and left to carry out the orders. Min-ho remained at the window, looking at the stars. He remembered when he had first arrived at Station 17. It had been a collection of empty metal rooms floating in the void. The location was far from the main trade routes, close to a region of space that other species considered worthless. The assembly had given it to humanity as a joke. "Here," they had said, "take this useless corner of nothing. Be grateful we give you anything at all." The humans had not seen useless space. They had seen opportunity. They had built Station 17 into a thriving outpost. They had discovered valuable minerals in the nearby asteroids. They had established trade with 3 smaller species who had been ignored by the major powers. Now, all of that would be abandoned. On the medical level of the station, Dr. Lee Ji-won was packing the last of her equipment. Ji-won was Minho's younger sister, though she hated when he mentioned it. She was 42 years old and had been running the station's medical facility for 8 years. Her assistant, Nurse Han Sora, helped her wrap the delicate instruments in protective foam. "Are we really taking all of this?" Sora asked. "Some of these machines were designed to treat alien species. They won't work on humans." "We take everything," Ji-won said firmly. "Every piece of technology, every scrap of data, every medicine we developed. Nothing gets left behind." Sora looked confused. "But the assembly might need." "The assembly made their choice," Ji-won interrupted. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "They decided they didn't need humans. We're simply accepting their decision." She continued packing in silence. Around her, the medical bay was slowly emptying. Cabinets that had been full of supplies now stood open and bare. Equipment that had saved hundreds of alien lives was being crated for transport. Back to Earth, Ji-won had treated patients from a dozen different species during her time on the station. She had learned their biologies, their diseases, their unique medical needs. She had developed new treatments that could help millions of beings across the galaxy. The assembly had laughed at human medicine. They had called it primitive, useless, fit only for weak human bodies. They had refused to even examine the data that proved otherwise. "Fine," Ji-won thought as she packed another crate. "If they don't want our help, they won't have to accept it anymore." In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Yoon Tai-woo was supervising the shutdown of the station's power systems. Tai-woo was 50 years old, with thick hands and a face weathered by years of hard work. He had built half of Station 17 with his own hands. "Careful with those connectors," he called out to his team. "I want them in perfect condition when we reinstall them back on Earth." One of his engineers, a young woman named Song Hana, paused in her work. "Chief, what about the maintenance systems we installed for the trading partners? The Velik ship that docked here last month, we fixed their life support. Should we leave instructions?" Tai-woo shook his head. "No instructions? No documentation. If they want to understand human engineering, they can figure it out themselves." Hannah looked uncertain. "But if something breaks, then they'll have to fix it," Tai-woo said. "We offered to teach them. We offered to share everything we knew. They said our technology was primitive. They said they had nothing to learn from us." He shrugged. "Maybe they were right. Maybe they don't need our help." He turned back to his work, disconnecting the power couplings with practiced skill. Each connection he severed was another link between humanity and the galaxy being cut. Over the next 3 weeks, Station 17 slowly died. The lights in empty corridors were turned off. The artificial gravity in unused sections was shut down. The life support systems were reduced to cover only the areas where humans still worked. Minho walked through the station each day, watching the evacuation proceed. He saw families boarding transport ships, children clutching toys and looking confused. He saw workers carrying the last of their personal belongings. He saw soldiers standing guard over crates of equipment waiting to be loaded. No one complained. No one protested. Everyone understood what was happening and why the galaxy had rejected humanity. Humanity was simply leaving. On the 20th day, Minho received a communication request from an alien ship. It was a Torak vessel carrying a trade delegation that had been scheduled to visit Station 17 for negotiations. "Human Commander," the Torak captain's voice came through the speakers. "We are approaching your station for the trade meeting. Why are your docking lights not active?" Minho activated the visual communication. The Torak captain appeared on screen, a massive creature covered in thick green scales, with 4 yellow eyes that blinked in sequence. "The trade meeting has been cancelled," Minho said politely. "Station 17 is being evacuated." The Torac's eyes widened. Evacuated? What do you mean? All human facilities in this sector are closing. We are returning to Earth. But the Torac seemed genuinely confused. You cannot simply leave. We have agreements. Trade contracts. Our ships depend on your station for repairs and supplies. Those agreements are no longer valid, Minho replied. Humanity is withdrawing from galactic affairs. We will not be providing services to other species any longer. The Torac captain's scales shifted color, turning a dark red that Minho recognized as anger. This is unacceptable. The Assembly will hear of this. The Assembly is welcome to hear of it, Minho said calmly. I doubt they will care. After all, human contributions to the galaxy are primitive and worthless. That is what the Assembly decided. We are simply agreeing with their assessment. He ended the communication and returned to supervising the evacuation. Dr. Li Jiwan finished archiving the last of her medical data on the 25th day. She had created detailed records of every treatment she had developed, every patient she had helped, every breakthrough she had made. All of it was now stored in secure human databases. She also made sure to delete all copies from the station's central computers. No trace of human medical knowledge would remain for the aliens to study. Nurse Han Sora watched her work. Doctor, some of this data could save lives. The treatment you developed for the blue fever, thousands of aliens die from that every year. I know, Jiwan said quietly. And you're just going to lock it away? Jiwan turned to face her assistant. Sora, do you remember when I presented my blue fever research to the medical committee of the Assembly? Do you remember what they said? Sora nodded slowly. They said human medicine was too simple to be effective. They said it was like giving a child's drawing to a gallery of master artists, Jiwan corrected. They laughed. They didn't even look at the data. 300 pages of research, clinical trials on 12 species, a 94% cure rate, and they laughed. She saved the final file and closed the archive. I spent 4 years developing that treatment. I worked nights and weekends. I begged for funding. I watched patients die while I searched for a cure. And when I finally succeeded, the galaxy told me my work was worthless. She stood and walked toward the door. Now they can find their own cure. I wish them luck. On the final day, Commander Minho was the last human on Station 17. His crew had already boarded the transport ships. His sister had left the day before, after a long embrace and a whispered promise to see him back on Earth. Only Minho remained, walking through the empty corridors one last time. The station was silent now. The hum of life support, the distant chatter of voices, the footsteps of busy workers, all gone. Only Minho's boots echoed in the darkness as he walked. He passed through the common area, where humans had gathered to eat and laugh and share stories. The tables were empty now. The walls were bare. Someone had forgotten to take down a small picture, a photograph of the station's crew, taken at last year's holiday celebration. Minho, the translation network, failed on Tuesday. Nobody knew it was a Tuesday, of course. Different species used different calendars, and the Galactic Assembly had never agreed on a standard way to measure time. But the humans who had built the translation network had programmed it to recognize Earth days, and so somewhere deep in its code, the system knew it was Tuesday when it stopped working. High Counselor Vex was in the middle of an important speech when the translators went silent. One moment, his words were being converted into 3,000 different languages, broadcast to representatives from across the galaxy. The next moment, there was only static. Vex was a tall being with silver skin and enormous black eyes, the same species as the Speaker of the Assembly. He had been lecturing the gathered representatives about the importance of maintaining galactic unity. Now, he stood at the podium, his mouth still moving, but no one could understand him. The assembly hall erupted in confusion. Representatives shouted at each other in languages none of their neighbors could comprehend. The Torak delegation pounded their massive fists on their desks. The Veliks clicked their mandibles in frustration. The cloud beings swirled in angry patterns. No one could talk to anyone else. In the technical control room beneath the assembly hall, alien engineers scrambled to fix the problem. The room was filled with screens and consoles, all showing the same error messages in the human-designed system. "What happened?" demanded Overseer Crix, a Velik's technical director who had been in charge of assembly systems for 200 years. "Why did the translators fail?" "We don't know," admitted one of his engineers. "The system just stopped. It's showing error codes we've never seen before." Crix studied the screens. The error messages were in a language he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to realize they were in English, the human language. "Get me the human technicians," he ordered. "They built this system. They can fix it." The engineer shifted uncomfortably. "Overseer, there are no human technicians." "What do you mean?" "The humans left. All of them. Their stations are empty. Their embassy is closed. They're gone." Crix stared at the engineer. His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep confusion among the Veliks. "Gone? Humans cannot simply leave. They have obligations, contracts. They maintain dozens of systems for the assembly." "They maintain dozens of systems," the engineer corrected quietly. "Now no one maintains them." It took 3 days to get the translation network working again. 3 days during which the Galactic Assembly could not function. 3 days during which trade agreements could not be negotiated. Disputes could not be resolved, and the business of governing a galaxy came to a complete stop. In the end, a team of Torak engineers managed to restart the system using a backup protocol they found buried in the code. They did not understand the protocol. They had simply pushed buttons until something worked. When the translators came back online, they were operating at 60% capacity. Many languages could no longer be translated accurately. Some could not be translated at all. "This is temporary," High Counselor Vex assured the assembly. "We will repair the system fully. We do not need human assistance." But nobody believed him. And nobody knew how to fix the problem. 2 weeks later, the medical stations began to fail. Counselor Bak Sujin had served on the Assembly's Health Committee for 30 years. She was a member of a species called the Harmon, known for their long lives and their deep concern for the well-being of others. She had worked closely with human doctors during her time on the committee. She had seen their dedication, their skill, their genuine desire to help. She had also watched the Assembly dismiss human medicine as primitive and worthless. Now, she stood in the emergency wing of the Central Medical Station, watching patients die. "The diagnostic systems are giving false readings," explained the station's chief medical officer, a Torak named Gorn, the same Gorn who had insulted human medicine at the assembly meeting. His scales had turned a sickly gray color, a sign of stress among his species. "We cannot determine what is wrong with the patients. The treatment protocols are not responding." "These are human-designed systems," Sujin said quietly. Gorn's scales shifted darker. "We know. We have been trying to access the maintenance protocols, but they require authorization codes that we do not have." "The humans took their codes with them." "Yes." Sujin walked through the emergency wing. Patients from a dozen species lay on treatment beds, their conditions worsening by the hour. The medical equipment around them beeped and flashed, displaying information that no one could interpret correctly. She stopped beside a young Velix patient. The child, for Sujin could tell it was young by the soft texture of its shell, was struggling to breathe. Its parents stood nearby, clicking their mandibles in distress. "Can you help her?" the mother asked. "The machines say she is fine, but she is not fine." Can you do something? Sujin looked at the diagnostic display. It showed all vital signs as normal, but she could see with her own eyes that the child was dying. The machines are wrong, she said softly. The human software that interpreted your biology, it is no longer functioning correctly. Then fix it. The father demanded. You are the health committee. Fix the machines. Sujin did not know what to say. She did not know how to fix the machines. No one did. The humans who had built them, who had understood them, who had maintained them with quiet dedication for decades, they were gone. She remembered a conversation she had once had with a human doctor named G1. The doctor had been explaining a new treatment protocol for a rare Velix disease. Sujin had listened carefully, impressed by the woman's knowledge and compassion. How did you learn so much about Velix biology? Sujin had asked. Jiwan had smiled. I asked questions. I observed. I studied every piece of information I could find. Your species has beautiful, complex bodies. It was an honor to learn how to help them. At the time, Sujin had thought nothing of the comment. Humans were always eager to please, always trying to prove their worth. It was almost pathetic, really, how hard they worked for scraps of approval. Now, standing beside a dying Velix child, Sujin understood. The humans had not been seeking approval. They had been offering a gift the galaxy had thrown back in their faces. The child died that night. So did 43 other patients across the medical station. Their deaths were listed as equipment malfunction in the official records. No one mentioned that the equipment had been working perfectly until the humans left. Over the following months, the failures spread like a disease through the galaxy. Navigation systems on thousands of ships began giving incorrect readings. Human-designed software had been calculating the safest routes through dangerous regions of space. Without proper maintenance, the calculations became less accurate. Ships that had traveled the same paths for decades suddenly found themselves in asteroid fields or too close to stars. 17 ships were lost in the first month alone. Agricultural systems on colony worlds started to break down. Human engineers had helped design irrigation networks, crop monitoring systems, and soil treatment protocols. When those systems failed, crops withered in the fields. On the farming world of Tessara, the harvest failed completely. 3 billion beings faced starvation. Emergency supplies had to be shipped from other worlds at enormous cost. The Torak blamed the Velix. The Velix blamed the cloud beings. Everyone blamed someone else. No one wanted to admit the truth. In the assembly, High Counselor Vex called an emergency session. This crisis is temporary, he insisted, his silver skin flashing with desperate energy. Our engineers are working to understand the human systems. Soon, we will be able to maintain them ourselves. Counselor Bak Sujin stood to respond. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. With respect, High Counselor, that is not true. I have spoken with engineers from 17 different species. None of them understand how the human systems work. The documentation was written in human languages, using human technical terms, following human logic. Without human assistance, we cannot decode it. Then we will rebuild the systems from scratch. Vex declared. That would take decades, Sujin replied. Perhaps centuries. The humans spent generations developing this technology. We cannot duplicate their work in a few months. Another counselor rose a massive Torak named Gresh. This is ridiculous, he growled. Humans are primitives. Their technology is simple. Our engineers are far superior. They will solve these problems quickly. Then why haven't they? Sujin asked simply. It has been 4 months since the humans departed. In that time, we have lost ships, patients, and crops. We have seen systems fail that we didn't even know humans were maintaining. If human technology is so primitive, why can't our superior engineers figure it out? Gresh had no answer. Neither did anyone else. The assembly session ended without resolution. The counselors returned to their sectors, to their failing systems, to their growing fears. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the region that humans had once called home remained silent. No signals came from that direction. No ships traveled those routes. The humans had closed the H. From 20 different species, carrying the best engineers, diplomats, and explorers the galaxy had to offer. Their mission was simple: find the humans and bring them back. Engineer Choi Taiho stood on the observation deck of the flagship, looking out at the assembled armada. Taiho was not human, he was Harmon, but his parents had given him a human name in honor of the human doctor who had saved his mother's life years ago. It was a common practice among some species, a small gesture of respect that most humans had never even known about. Now, Taiho was one of the few beings in the galaxy who understood even a fraction of human engineering. He had studied with human teachers as a young engineer. He had learned their methods, their logic, their way of thinking about problems. It was not enough to fix the failing systems across the galaxy, but it was more than anyone else had. That was why the assembly had asked him to join the search fleet. Beside him stood Specialist Han Yunji, a Velic scientist who had spent decades researching human culture and history. Despite her species' general contempt for humans, Yunji had always found them fascinating. She had collected recordings of human music, copies of human art, translations of human literature. Her colleagues had mocked her obsession with a primitive species. They were not mocking her now. "The fleet is ready," Yunji said, her mandibles clicking softly. "We enter human space in 1 hour." Taiho nodded. He felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Hope that they would find the humans, convince them to return, save the galaxy from slow collapse. Dread that they would find nothing at all. The flagship's captain, a massive Taurak named Gresh, the same one who had dismissed human technology in the assembly, gave the order to advance. The fleet moved forward as one, crossing the invisible boundary into human territory. For the first hour, they found nothing. Space was empty, silent, dark. Their sensors detected no ships, no stations, no signals of any kind. It was as if humanity had been erased from existence. Then they reached the first abandoned colony. The planet was called New Sol. It had been one of the first worlds humans colonized after joining the galactic community. 100,000 people had lived there, building cities and farms and factories. They had created a new home far from Earth. Now, the cities were empty. The search fleet sent down landing parties. Taiho and Yunji were among the first to set foot on the silent streets. What they found amazed them. Everything was perfect. The buildings were intact, clean, well-maintained. The streets were clear of debris. The power systems were still running, keeping lights on and climate systems active. Gardens bloomed in public squares, watered by automated systems that continued to function flawlessly. But there were no people. Not a single human remained. "It's like they just left," Yunji whispered. Her compound eyes swept across the empty plaza. No damage. No signs of struggle. They simply walked away. Taiho entered one of the residential buildings. The apartments inside were tidy and bare. Personal belongings had been removed. Furniture remained, but anything that might identify the former occupants was gone. In one apartment, he found a child's room. The bed was neatly made. The shelves were empty, except for a single toy, a small stuffed animal that might have been a dog or a bear. Someone had left it behind, either by accident or as a silent message. Taiho picked up the toy and held it for a long moment. Then he tucked it into his pocket and continued his search. The fleet spent 3 days on New Sol. They explored every building, every facility, every underground tunnel. They found records, but all the important data had been erased. They found technology, but all the critical systems had been locked with codes no one could break. The humans had left nothing useful behind. Just empty shells of buildings, monuments to a civilization that no longer wanted to be found. The search continued. Over the following weeks, the fleet visited 17 human colonies. Each one told the same story. Perfect preservation. Complete abandonment. No explanation. On the colony called Hope's Landing, Yoonji found something that made her mandibles click with distress. It was a recording, stored in a public terminal that had been overlooked during the evacuation. The recording was corrupted, fragmented, but she managed to reconstruct parts of it. A human woman's voice spoke in the darkness of the terminal room. Understand now that we were never wanted here. Not really. We came to the stars with open hands, offering everything we had. We thought that if we worked hard enough, if we proved ourselves worthy, they would eventually accept us. Static interrupted the recording. Then the voice returned, but they never saw us as equals. They never saw us as partners. We were entertainment to them. A curiosity, sometimes useful, like a clever pet that can perform tricks, but never respected, never valued for who we truly are. More static. Yoonji adjusted the terminal, trying to recover more of the recording. So we made a choice. Not in anger, not in revenge. We simply asked ourselves, why are we here? What are we trying to prove? And to whom? If the galaxy doesn't want us, then perhaps we should stop forcing ourselves on them. Perhaps we should find our own path, away from their contempt. The recording ended. Yoonji sat in the dark room for a long time, thinking about what she had heard. She remembered her own attitudes toward humans. She had studied them, yes. She had found them interesting. But had she ever truly respected them? Had she ever treated them as equals? She thought about the conversations she had overheard among her colleagues. The jokes about human primitiveness. The dismissive comments about human intelligence. The casual assumption that anything humans did could be done better by real species. We did this, she realized. We pushed them away. And now that they're gone, we can't survive without them. Captain Gresh grew more frustrated with each empty world. He had expected to find humans hiding, waiting to be convinced to return. He had prepared speeches about the importance of galactic unity, about how much humanity was needed, about how things would be different if they came back. But there was no one to give speeches to. The humans were simply gone. This is impossible. Gresh roared during a strategy meeting on the flagship. His scales had turned an angry red that made the other species nervous. They cannot have simply vanished. 100 million humans. They must be somewhere. They are somewhere, Taiho said quietly. They're just not here. Then where? Taiho hesitated. He had been studying the patterns of the evacuation, trying to understand how the humans had managed to disappear so completely. He had a theory, but he knew the others would not want to hear it. I believe they went home, he said finally. Back to Earth. And then they made themselves invisible. Invisible? That's absurd, is it? Taiho pulled up a star chart on the main display. Look at this region of space. Before the humans left, we could detect their ships, their stations, their communications. Now, we detect nothing. Our sensors show empty space. But the stars are still there. The planets are still there. Logically, humanity should still be there. He highlighted a section of the chart. I believe the humans developed some kind of barrier. Something that blocks our sensors, our communications, perhaps even physical travel. They didn't just leave. They locked the door behind them. The other officers stared at the chart. The idea that humans' primitive, young, insignificant humans could develop technology that the elder species couldn't penetrate was almost impossible to accept, but the evidence was right in front of them. Empty colonies. Silent space. 100 million people who had vanished without a trace. If they built a barrier, Yunji said slowly, then they planned this. They didn't leave on impulse. They prepared for years, maybe decades. They built the technology they needed to disappear. And they waited. Waited for what? Gresh demanded. For us to prove we would never accept them, Taiho answered. And we did. Every insult, every dismissal, every laugh at their expense, it all added up. They knew exactly what we thought of them. And eventually, they decided they didn't need our approval anymore. The search fleet spent 2 more weeks exploring human territory. They found more abandoned colonies, more empty stations, more silence. They tried to send signals through the barrier that Taiho had theorized about. None of the signals received any response. Finally, they found the records. On a small station near the edge of human space, Yunji discovered an archive that had been left deliberately. It contained thousands of documents, records of human contributions to the galaxy over the past century. There were reports on medical breakthroughs that had saved millions of lives. There were technical specifications for systems that kept hundreds of worlds functioning. There were diplomatic records showing how humans had mediated disputes, built alliances, helped struggling species find their feet. And there were records of how those contributions had been received. Onji read through the documents for hours. She found transcripts of assembly meetings where human proposals were dismissed without consideration. She found communications from alien officials that dripped with condescension. She found reports from human diplomats describing years of patient effort met with nothing but contempt. One document in particular caught her attention. It was a summary of human sentiment prepared by Earth's government as part of the decision to withdraw. A survey had been conducted among all humans living in the galaxy. The question was simple. Do you believe we will ever be accepted as equals? 97% of respondents had answered 10 years had passed since the humans left. Elder Yu Mairei sat in the ruins of what had once been the greatest hall in the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly building was still standing, but barely. Half the lights no longer worked. The crystal ceiling had cracked in 3 places. The seats where thousands of representatives had once gathered were empty and covered in dust. Mairei was Harmon, one of the long-lived species who had witnessed the rise and fall of many civilizations. She had served on the assembly for 200 years. She had watched the humans arrive, eager and hopeful. She had watched them be mocked and dismissed. She had said nothing. Now she sat alone in the darkness, waiting for a meeting that would never happen. The assembly had collapsed 3 years after the humans departed. Without the translation systems, species could not communicate. Without shared communication, disputes could not be resolved. Without resolution, conflicts erupted. Small wars became large wars. Alliances crumbled. Trade networks fell apart. The Taurak Dominion had withdrawn from the assembly first. They blamed the Veliks for the translation failures. The Veliks blamed the cloud beings. Everyone blamed everyone else. No one blamed themselves. Mairei remembered the last session of the assembly. Fewer than 100 representatives had attended. They had argued for hours about who was responsible for the collapse. When the session ended, no new meeting was scheduled. That was 3 years ago. Huh? No one had returned since. She came here sometimes alone to think. The empty hall helped her remember what had been lost. Not just the assembly, but everything it had represented. Unity, cooperation, the belief that different species could work together for the common good. All of it was gone now. The galaxy was dying. Not quickly. There was no dramatic collapse, no final catastrophe. Just a slow, grinding decay as systems failed, one by one, and no one knew how to fix them. Medical stations had shut down across 100 worlds. The equipment was too damaged to use, the software too corrupted to run. Diseases that had been easily treated now killed millions. Species that had relied on human medical technology were suffering terribly. Transportation networks had broken down. Without proper navigation systems, ships crashed or got lost. Trade between distant worlds had become almost impossible. Populations that had depended on imported food and resources were starving. The worst part was the silence. Myray remembered when the galaxy had been alive with voices. Millions of species communicating, sharing, arguing, celebrating. Now, most communication channels were dead. Species had retreated to their home systems, cutting ties with the wider galaxy. Some blamed the humans for the collapse. They called the withdrawal an act of aggression, a deliberate attack on galactic civilization. They demanded that humanity be punished for abandoning their responsibilities. But Myri knew the truth. The humans had not attacked anyone. They had not sabotaged anything. They had simply stopped helping. And without their help, everything fell apart. She thought about all the things humans had done that no one had noticed. They had maintained systems that everyone took for granted. They had solved problems that other species could not be bothered to address. They had worked quietly in the background, keeping the galaxy running smoothly. No one had thanked them. No one had even acknowledged their contributions. The elder species had been too busy congratulating themselves on their ancient wisdom to notice the young species doing the actual work. Now that work was undone, and the ancient wisdom turned out to be worth very little when the lights stopped working. A noise from the entrance made Myray turn. Someone else was entering the ruined hall. She was surprised. She had not seen another being here in months. The figure that approached was Velix. Old, by the standards of that species. Myray recognized her after a moment. Specialist Han Yunji, who had led the failed search for the humans years ago. Elder Myray, Yunji said. Her mandibles clicked softly in greeting. I thought I might find you here. I come to remember, Myray replied. There is little else to do these days. Yunji settled into a seat nearby. Her shell was dull and scarred signs of poor nutrition and inadequate medical care. The Velix homeworld had been struggling since the human medical systems failed. I have been thinking about them, Yunji said. The humans. Every day for 10 years, as have I. I keep wondering what we could have done differently. If we had treated them with respect from the beginning. If we had listened to their proposals. If we had seen them as partners instead of children. Myray nodded slowly. I have asked myself the same questions. I have no answers. I found something recently, Yunji said. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small device. A recording. From the human archive we discovered during the search. I thought all those records had been studied. This one was hidden. Encrypted. It took me years to break the code. Yunji activated the device. I think you should hear it. A human voice filled the ruined hall. It was an old man, speaking slowly and carefully. This message is for whoever finds it, long after we are gone. I am Park Do-yun. Some of you may remember me. I was the one who presented humanity's trade proposal to the Assembly, the day they laughed at us. I have spent my life thinking about that day. I was young then. I believed that I had failed. That if I had been more persuasive, more impressive, things might have been different. Now I am old, and I understand the truth. Nothing I said would have mattered. The Assembly had decided what we were before I ever spoke. They saw primitives, children, newcomers who should be grateful for scraps. No evidence would have changed their minds. So I stopped trying to change their minds. We all did. And we found something remarkable. When we stopped seeking their approval, we discovered we did not need it. When we stopped trying to prove ourselves worthy, we realized we had always been worthy. Our value did not depend on what they thought of us. It never had. We are home now. We are building something new. Not for the galaxy rejected us. Not for ourselves, we have always known our own worth. We are building for our children and their children and all the generations to come. They will never know the galaxy that mocked us. They will never carry the weight of seeking approval that would never come. They will grow up free, knowing that humanity needs no one's permission to be great. To whoever hears this message, I hope you understand. We did not leave in anger. We did not leave in defeat. We left because we finally understood that we were wasting our lives trying to belong to a civilization that would never accept us. We wish you no harm. We take no pleasure in your struggles, but we will not return. That chapter of our story is closed. Goodbye, and good luck. The recording ended. Silence filled the ruined hall. Myrae felt tears forming in her ancient eyes. She had lived for centuries. She had seen civilizations rise and fall, but she had never felt as hollow as she did in this moment. He was at peace, Yunji said softly. You can hear it in his voice. No bitterness, no hatred, just acceptance. Acceptance that we would never change, Myrae replied. And he was right. We never did. They sat together in the darkness for a long time. Outside the broken crystal ceiling, the stars turned slowly, indifferent to the suffering below. Somewhere out there, beyond a barrier that no sensor could penetrate, humanity was thriving. They had turned inward, focused on their own growth, their own development, their own future. They had left the galaxy to its fate, and the galaxy was facing that fate alone. In the years that followed, the decline continued. More systems failed. More species retreated into isolation. The great achievements of galactic civilization, the networks that connected worlds, the institutions that maintained peace, the shared knowledge that lifted all species, crumbled into dust. Some species survived by adapting. They learned to build their own systems, relying only on themselves. It was harder than they had expected. Things that humans had made look easy turned out to be incredibly difficult. Others did not survive. Without medical technology, diseases spread unchecked. Without transportation, populations starved. Without communication, wars erupted that might have been prevented by a single conversation. The Galactic Assembly was never rebuilt. The Grand Hall stood empty, a monument to arrogance and lost opportunity. Elder Myrae lived for another 50 years, watching the slow collapse of everything she had known. On her deathbed, surrounded by her descendants, she spoke her final words. Remember the humans. Remember what we did to them. Remember what we lost. And if we ever have the chance to make things right, do not repeat our mistakes. Her descendants listened. They passed the story down to their own children and their children's children. The tale of humanity, the young species that had offered the galaxy everything, asked for nothing but respect and been met with contempt, became a legend among the Harmon. But legends fade. Generations passed. The galaxy fragmented into isolated pockets of civilization, each struggling to survive alone. The memory of what had been lost grew dim. And humanity? Humanity thrived. Behind their barrier, protected from the galaxy that had rejected them, humans built wonders that the elder species could never have imagined. They developed technologies that made their old achievements look primitive. They created art, music, Li,